Chapter 3, Class 8, Ruling the Countryside. History. The first English ship sailed towards India on 18th century. Grant of Diwani and financial powers. The East India Company was made by the Diwan of Bengal on 12th August 1765 by then Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. Thus, the company became the chief financial administrator of the territory of Bengal. The company officials understood one important aspect of expanding their base in India. They understood the importance of those who had ruled the countryside in the past and had enjoyed authority and prestige. The company wanted to be careful not to annoy those people. Growth of revenue. Initially, the company was just increase in collecting revenue so that its trade off and other expenses could be financed. But the company was not interested in the setting up any regular system of assessment and collection. The revenue was enough to double the purchase by the company within the 5 years. Growth of problems for the commission people, but the Bengal economy was facing a deep crisis. Artisans were being forced to sell their goods to the company at the low prices, and hence the most of them were deserting their villages. The peasants were not able to pay the dues. Productions by artisans declined, and farm production also declined. In 1770, a terrible famine hit Bengal. It killed 10 million people. Permanent settlement. The company had to take some steps to improve the agriculture by improving investment in land. The permanent settlement was introduced in 1793. According to this, the Rajas and the Talukadars were recognized as zamindars and were given the responsibility of the revenue collection from the peasants. The amount to be paid was fixed permanently, and hence the name permanent settlement. The company officials felt that it would ensure a regular flow of revenue. They also felt that this would motivate the zamindars to invest in the improving the land. Zamindars would benefit from increased productions because the revenue demand would not be increased. Robert Clive. Robert Clive, the first Baron Clive, also known as the Clive of the India, Commander-in-Chief of the British India, was a British officers and the soldiers of the fortune who established the military and political supremacy of East India Company in. Together with Warren Hastings, he was one of the key early figures in the creations of British India. He also sat for the two boroughs as a Tory member of the Parliament in the Great Britain. Modern historians have criticized him for the atrocities and the pillaging of the treasures which occurs in Bengal and India due to the high taxations he instituted. And for the problem of permanent settlement, the revenue was fixed at such a high level that the zamindars found it difficult to pay. A zamindar who failed to pay the revenue lost his zamindari. Hence, the zamindars were not investing in the improvement of land. But the situations changed by the first decade of 19th century. There was price rise and expansion in the cultivations. The income of the zamindars increased, but it did not result in any gain for the company because of fixed revenue demand. The zamindars preferred to earn as much profit as they could and seldom bothered about the investing a land. They were just happy to lease out the land to tenants. The system was extremely oppressive for the cultivators. He had to pay a high rent to the jamidars, but there was no security of his right on the land. Cultivators often had to take loan from the money lenders to pay rent. Failure of payment of the rental mean evictions for the cultivator from the land. Mahalwari settlements. By the early 19th century, the company officials were planning to change the revenue system. A new system was devised, Holt Mackenzie. Mackenzie was convinced about the importance of the village in the North Indian society. He wanted to preserve his important social institution, and he sent collectors to different villages to take a survey. Data regarding land size and types of customs and rights of the different groups were collected. The revenue estimation was done for each village. The village was known as Mahal, and hence this system was known as Mahalwari System. It was also decided to revise the revenue demand periodically. The village headman was given the responsibility of revenue collection. The Munro System. This system was also known as the Diwani system. It was the first tried on the small scales by Captain Alexander Red. He tried in the some of the areas which were taken over the defeat of Tipu Sultan. This system was subcontinentally developed by Thomas Munro. This system was gradually implemented all over the south. These were no traditional zamindars in the south, hence, the settlements had to be directly made with the cultivators. The roots had been tilling the land for the generations. Their fields were carefully surveyed to make the revenue assessment. Thomas Munro, Governor of Madras. Sir Thomas Munro, first Baronet KCB, was a Scottish soldier and colonial administrator. He was an East India Company army officer and statesman. He served with his regiment during the hard-fought war against Hyder Ali, which was held in 1780 to 1783. Serving under his order and distant relations, Major Sir Hector Munro's 8th of November. Problems of excessive revenue demand. The revenue officials wanted to increase the income from land, hence, they fixed very high revenue demand. The peasants were not able to pay the revenue. The riots fled the countrysides, and villages became destroyed in many regions. Crops for Europe. By the late 18th century, the company was also trying to expand the cultivations of opium and indigo. In the subcontinent, 150 years, the British also persuaded or forced to the cultivators to produce other crops like jute, tea, sugarcane, cotton, wheat, and rice to be supplied in Europe. High demand of indigo. The tropic climate is good for the indigo plantations. By the 13th century, Indian indigo was being used in Italy, France, and Britain. But the price of indigo was very high, and hence a small amount of Indian indigo, could reach the European market. Wood is another plant which is used for making violet and blue dyes. Wood is a plant of temperate zone and hence was easily available in Europe. Wood was grown in northern Italy, southern France, and in the part of Germany and Britain. The wood producers in Europe were worried by the competition from indigo and hence pressurized their government to ban the import of indigo. India, a major source of indigo. The company looked for ways to expand the area under the indigo cultivations in India. From the last decades of the 18th century, indigo cultivations in Bengal rapidly expanded. Only about 30% of indigo imported to Britain in 1788 was from India, and this figure went up to 95% by 1810. Commercial agents and officials of the company began investing in the indigo productions to increase their profit. Many company officials even left their jobs to look after their indigo business. Many people from Scotland and England came to India and became planters. To grab the opportunity, the company and banks were given loans for indigo cultivations at that time. System of indigo cultivation. Nij cultivation. In his system, the planters produce indigo on those land which were under his direct control. The planters either bought the land on or rented it from the other zamindars. He directly employed laborers to produce indigo. The problems with niche cultivation. Indigo could only be cultivated on fertile land, but these areas were densely populated and hence the only small plots could be acquired. This made it difficult to expand the area under niche cultivations. They attempted to lease in the land around the indigo factory. While doing so, they evicted the peasants from the areas. Peasants' eviction always created conflict and tension. Long plantations required a large number of workers. Work at indigo plantations coincided with the time when the peasants were busy with the cultivations. Hence, the mobilizing the labor for the indigo cultivation was a difficult task. Blue Rebellion. Thousands of riots in Bengal refused to grow indigo in March 1859. The riots refused to pay rents to the planters. They attacked indigo factories. They used to be armed with sword and spears, bows and arrows. Women also fought with pots, panda, and kitchen implements. Those who worked for the planters were socially boycotted. The Gomasthas were beaten off when they came to collect them. The Gomathas were the agents of indigo planters. In many villages, headmen mobilized the indigo peasants against the Lathias. The headmen, with the angry because they had been forced to sign indigo contract. Some zamindars were angry with the increasing power of the planters and being forced to give them land on long lease. So the zamindars also supported the villagers in their revolt against the indigo planters. After the revolt of 1857, the British government was worried about the possibility of another popular rebellion. When the news of Indigo revolt spread, the lieutenant governor toured to the region in the winter of 1859. This was seen as a sign of sympathy by the riots. They began to believe that the British government would support them in their struggle. When the rebellion spread, intellectuals from Calcutta rushed to the Indigo districts. They began writing about the misery of the riots and the horrors of the Indigo system. The government called the military up to protect the planters. The Indigo Commission was set up to inquire into the system of indigo production. The commission held the planters guilty and it asked the commission rights to fulfill their existing obligation and they were free to cultivate whatever they wished. After the revolt, the indigo production collapsed in Bengal. After the revolt, the planters now shifted their operations in Bihar. Discovery of synthetic dyes in the late 19th century severely affected the business, but the planters managed to expand production. When Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa, the plight of indigo farmers in Champaran was brought in his notice. Mahatma Gandhi visited Champaran in 1917 and began the movement against the indigo planters. Another question is, describe the main features of the permanent settlement. Answer. The permanent settlement system was a land revenue system introduced in 1793 by East India Company. Rajas and talukadars were recognized as zamindars to collect rent from the peasants and pay revenue to the company. The main features of permanent settlements: the amount paid by the zamindars to the company was fixed permanently. The Rajas were made the Jamidars. Jamidars lost their right over the lands whenever they failed to make payments to the company. Exorbitant prices of land which Zamindars had to pay to the company. Another question is, how was the Mahalwari system different from the permanent settlement? Answer. Different between the Mahalwari system and permanent settlement are given below. Mahalwari system, Holt Mackenzie devised it and it came into effect in 1822, whereas permanent settlement, the permanent settlement was brought by Lord Cornwallis in 1793. The revenue was to be revised periodically, whereas other side revenue was fixed. The charge of the collect the revenue was on the village headman, whereas the charge to collect the revenue was on village jamidars. The next question is, give two problems which arose with the Munro system of fixing revenue. Answer. The new Munro system of fixing revenue posed two problems. The first problem was the revenue demand was fixed way too high for the peasants to pay. Second was the peasants were unable to pay the rent, which culminated into villages getting deserted. Question number 7. What were the circumstances which led the eventual collapse of indigo production in Bengal? So the answer is, the collapse of indigo production in Bengal was caused by the following circumstances. The first was the riots denied producing the indigo anymore. Protests started taking place by the peasants, riots supported by the zamindars. Following the protests, the Indigo Commission was instituted by the government, which accepted the faults of the planters and asked the planters to stop the cultivation. The planters eventually moved out of the city. Fill in the blanks. The first question, The growers of wood in Europe saw dash as a crop which would provide competition to their earnings. The second question, demand for indigo increased in the late 18th century Britain because of dash. The international demand for indigo was affected by the discovery of dash. The Champaran movement was against dash. So the answers given in the next slot. Here are the answers of fill in the blanks. The first answer is indigo. The second answer is expansion of cotton production. The third answer is synthetic dyes. And the fourth answer is indigo planters. Dear students, I hope you have understood this chapter. So go through the chapter and answer also given. Do your answer in your notebook. Stay at home. Thank you.